Welcome back to another episode of the Engineer Future Podcast. I'm your host, Duque, and today I have Laura Prieto with me here. We will be talking about some of the things that she's doing as an engineer, as an entrepreneur with her own business, and I'm just very excited to jump into that conversation today. How are you doing today, Laura? And just tell us a little bit about yourself, about your company, and some of the products that you're launching here soon.
Hi, Liz. Thank you so much for having me here. It's really a pleasure to be here. And as you said, my name is Laura Prieto. I am from Colombia originally, and I moved to the United States when I was 7 years old. So I've been here most of my life. And I am a civil and environmental engineer. Recently, I've been delving into entrepreneurship, and I have founded this company called Sparkle STEM Connect, and it's a subscription box company with a membership. It's going to have a digital membership, and it's meant to be for women in STEM. It's mainly to bring more self care and encourage more personal development in women in STEM. As a woman in STEM myself, it's been, mostly I've been focused on my career, and ever since I, started college, it's always work, work, work. And once I became a mom, that's really when everything kind of changed for me. I realized that I was spending too much time at work, and work was basically consuming me. And I realized that I needed to have a little more self care. So this has been in the works, like in my mind, for a long time. But just recently, it was kind of like, 2 years ago, I was like, I'm going to do it. And then I was like, no, 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 not yet, not yet. I'm thinking, second guessing myself, imposter syndrome, all these things that come up for us always when we're trying to do new things. And then this year, I was pregnant with my second daughter, and I was like, you know what, this year's gonna be the year of risks, and I was like, I'm gonna do it, however long it takes. I'm gonna do it this year, and so we are launching this Friday, well, November 4th, and I'm really excited about it. I have seen how other women in STEM have been responding to it, so I'm really excited about helping others.
Yeah, that's super exciting. I didn't know you were from Colombia. I don't know if you know, but I'm also from Colombia. So
I
it's very
didn't
exciting
know
to
that.
see other people. I love talking to other Hispanics, and I don't think there are a lot that I brought here in the show that are from Colombia. So it's always exciting to just see what other people are up to and like their journey and everything. I just want to acknowledge first of all, like having two kids is a lot. I know as a mom, you're probably overwhelmed. So doing all of these things right as we move transition into that motherhood, I think it's difficult. I know, like you were saying, you went to do this for a while, and now you're kind of jumping into it. And we'll talk about the giveaway and some other things here in the future. But how was that experience, kind of when you wanted to start this like side business, entrepreneur side, like whatever you want to call it, and like how did your family play a role into that, if any?
Yeah, so this whole journey, because it's been a journey, has been going on for years. I, I used to work in construction. That's kind of like where I started. And that was also a pivoting point for me because I was spending even more time at work. And I got married. And then that's when I was like, okay, I need more time, like with my husband. And that's when I switched over to design instead of construction. And that's kind of also when I started listening to podcasts and learning all about like business and a lot of different opportunities that were available like in the online world. And that's when it really like I got this itch of like, okay, there's stuff outside of engineering that I could be doing. And I am a very creative person, and that's kind of like where it all came to be. I was like, okay, I can do so many different things. And so I started kind of like a shop on Etsy, like, so it's been progressing. um, it's just kind of been that because I'm so creative, I have so many thoughts and ideas that I'm like, I want to run to all of them. I had the idea of starting a podcast, so I did it as well. And so it's been quite the journey, and thankfully my family has been very supportive. I think I'm the one that's really hard on myself, trying to like, make it all successful in day one, but they've been super like supportive, even with the podcast, and with like the shops that I've had, all the other ideas that I've had. I've like purchased courses, and I'm always like, oh my gosh, my husband's gonna think I'm crazy. He calls me even with the box right now. Like my oldest daughter helps; she's like the shipping department,
That's nice.
so she helps me with shipping. So it's nice because it's like your dream, but they come with you and they help you through it. So even though it's hard as well to balance everything, but it's a nice little reminder that you're doing it for them. So it works out.
Yeah, and I think that's important too. Like I know as a woman in STEM family, it's a big part of it, and it's nice to have that support. I know a lot of people don't really have that support, and that's when we start running into issues. People live in STEM, people just going off the road and not really getting to that end goal of becoming a successful engineer if that's what they want to do, focus on the family if that's what they want to do. So it's kind of exciting to hear more and more of these stories. I know in this show I've interviewed a lot of people that have kids, younger people that have kids that are in STEM, are practicing engineering, are practicing in the STEM field, and it's always fascinating to me how we have these stories, but you don't really hear them too much online. So we should be talking about these a little more, and obviously supporting each other and collaborating and everything. Um, I want to ask you, what has been kind of your experience in terms of getting to know other people in engineering, other women in engineering, other mothers in engineering doing similar things, and what has that kind of experience or exposure has been for you?
Yeah, so it's interesting that you bring that up because for a long time when I was, before I got pregnant, like I knew obviously other women that had kids and were engineers, but I didn't have really that many role models. So in construction, like my boss was a woman, and that was a huge role model, but she didn't have any kids. And that's kind of where I was like, I don't want to have her job because it's not showing me that it's possible to have like a family and to still be like in that level in the corporate world. And then when I switched over to design, that was one of the things that I saw, like this coworker of mine that she had, her kids, she worked part-time, but she looked like a successful engineer. So then I was like, okay, it's possible. And then I was pregnant, and then I was like, how do people do it? I was like trying to find like on Instagram, like exactly what you're saying. I was trying to find those conversations, those examples of other people with kids, and hopefully you don't take it the wrong way, but usually, I would say, oh, well, what, usually it's men, the majority, that are working in these fields. And so I would look at like my bosses or like, superiors, even just coworkers, and it was like, well, they have kids, but what does like the wife do? They're taking care of the kids, And so it was always like, how does that all fit in for me? Like, what am I supposed to do? So it was really hard actually to find those people. And I like in my current job, there's a lot of women, thankfully, but that's like odd.
Hmm.
Like I work in transportation. It's not very, common to have so many women working alongside you. But through that experience, it was kind of like other friends that I worked with, like also got pregnant. So it was like, okay, it was kind of like, okay, we're getting there. And well, the people I work with are really helpful, and they've been great throughout the whole journey of becoming a mom. But it's still that they work with you, so there's still
Hmm.
that part of like, I don't know if to ask this, like I don't know if we have that level of like trust,
Yeah.
with some people. So it's definitely hard because I think you always put this persona in front of you of like, oh, that's them. Like, for me, it's different in some way. And sometimes it's the same for all of us, but we're so blinded by our own experiences and our own beliefs of what it should be. So it's definitely been hard. And I think that's also what inspired me, like, to kind of talk about it more. And I started like sharing more of that engineering aspect of it on my podcast. Because when I started out, I didn't even say I was an engineer. It was kind of like I didn't even want to like acknowledge it because it didn't seem like fun to show, like, to share with that. But then I started sharing more about like motherhood and stuff like that. And then I started getting that response from other women that were like, that is so cool what you do. Thank you for sharing that. And then it kind of reinforces the idea that we should all share our story because our experiences are important and they will help others. So,
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's exactly right, and I think that's kind of one of the reasons I started this podcast in the first place. Just share my story as a Hispanic in engineering, with the struggles, the good things, the bad things, and just getting the word out there of what's like to be an engineer, what's like to be a Hispanic coming from Colombia. I only came here when I went to college, so I didn't really grow up in the US. I used to have all my family back in Colombia. So like, what's the cultural shock, the missing food, missing
yeah.
family, missing all these things that you don't really see when you are working at your desk and being an engineer every day. So that's kind of the main goal of the podcast, and just helping other engineers succeed in their careers. That's kind of the main tagline of the show in general. And again, it's always great to hear when other people share their stories, when other people are explaining how they got there, what made them successful. And I just want to continue sharing those stories. And I think your story is great as well. I want to touch a little bit more on kind of your business and your podcast and everything that you're doing. If you want to share a little bit more about your show and some of the things that you talk about and what inspired you to start a podcast.
Yeah, definitely. So the podcast is called Póngase las pilas, and it's actually like bilingual. Even though the name is in Spanish, I mostly speak in English because my audience mostly resonates with English. But I do have some episodes that are in Spanish, and I basically was motivated to start it from this podcast called Super Mamas, because even though I was not a mom yet, I found this podcast and I fell in love with it. It was like two sisters sharing about motherhood. And my sister, she has three kids. So even though I didn't have any kids, they were like my kids, because like, just like la tia, I want to be involved in everything. So I started listening to a motherhood podcast to help her kind of with her kids. And then that inspired me. I was like, they're doing it. Like, why can't I do it? And I actually asked my sister to be on the podcast with me. She was like, no. So at work, I started talking to this coworker and we became really good friends. And we started like sharing stories about engineering and how we, we kind of like clicked on so many things of our like childhood that as like up until that point, I had felt like it was just me kind of thing. Like no one else would understand what I was going through, but she did because she's also like Hispanic and like these other things just kind of like clicked. And so I was like, hey, do you want to be on the podcast with me? And so that's how it started because she was like the cheerleader that said, yes, let's do it. And so we started the podcast together back in 2019. Then she decided to she didn't want to do it anymore. And so I continued and I'm still like with the podcast. Right now it's on a break because as I said, I had a baby recently. And so it's been hard to kind of like keep up with everything, and especially with the box that I've been working on. So yeah, that's Póngase las pilas. It usually airs on Tuesdays. And I think it's been one of those projects that you kind of like, you just start to see where it goes, but it's been like a really nice project and a good part of kind of like my journey, because sometimes it kind of like that part of like you see how you grow when you listen back to your previous episodes, and you can definitely see the growth. So it's kind of, I always think it's kind of a memoir that I'm leaving for my daughters so that they could kind of see, oh, this is what my mom was thinking back when she was 30, you know?
Right.
So I think it's a nice gift that I always wanted to have from my parents, kind of see even just pictures of them when they were younger, but there's not that many of those. So um, that's always what I've thought of the podcast as being more of also that personal journey that I could share with them when they're older.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting too, because I mean, I have two kids too. So like doing all these things online, it's
Yeah.
like in 10, 20, 30 years, they're going to go back and see this episode or other episodes or the things I share on social media and everything. And that's going to be there, I think, forever. So they're going to be able to see the things that I was thinking, how I
Yeah.
looked when I was 27, 28, and how I'm looking when I'm 50, 60 years old. So it's kind of interesting that you also thought about, think about these the same way. For the people that don't speak Spanish, how do you translate or how would you say póngase las pilas in English?
Yes, I have thought about this for a long time, and I'm always like, what is it that I would say? So I always think of it as get yourself together. Like, like it's that, it's like kind of like that phrase that moves you into action. That's what I've always thought of it as.
Yeah.
So that's what I think of it. I was always like, oh, if I ever get called into Good Morning America, that's what I'm going to say.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's a great title. I mean, obviously, most people maybe don't understand it, but once you get it, like, and I imagine it's kind of related to what you talk in the show as well. Just kind of get yourself going and motivated to um,
Yeah.
do
It's
many
definitely
things.
a motivational podcast,
Right.
definitely. And my friend, when were looking for a name for it, she was like, "But it's in Spanish. Like, like, what are we gonna do?" I was like, "Doesn't matter. Our audience is supposed to know
Right.
because we have a defined audience." So that's why I never really worried too much about like, will they understand it? But I do get a lot of like, what does it mean?
Mhm.
But I was like, whoever needs to get it will get it.
Exactly. Okay, I think that's a great segue. You mentioned the box, some of the things you're working on right now. I know we were talking about here before we started recording that you're on maternity leave, so I'm sure you maybe have a little extra time on your hands in terms of like you're not working, but you're taking care of now two kids, which it's a lot. Maybe you're not sleeping at night. So how are you balancing all these things? And just kind of tell us a little bit more about the box and what's in it and kind of the motivation behind it. Um, if there's anything like interesting that's going to be in the box that you know right now, what are some of the brands you're working with, and just kind of give us a backstory on that.
Yeah, so for the box, it's like I said, it's been kind of on my mind for a while. It's kind of one of those things that you see a product and you're like, how come there's not this for women in STEM? There's so many things that we don't have as women in STEM, right? And it was always kind of like that. It was also in part with like the podcast too, because of, again, motivating other women. And I started off as motivating professionals, Latinas,
Mhm.
because I thought that I was like, no one's gonna want to hear about engineering. That's what I was thinking. But as with this whole boom in like STEM influencers and all that, I was like, oh wait, maybe people are interested in it. And that's also kind of like what moved me into like, okay, maybe it is something that, you know, they would find helpful. And I started talking to like coworkers and other friends that are engineers, and not even talking about the box or the concept that I had on my mind. I was just talking to them like normal conversations of like everyday life. And I was like, we're all kind of going through a lot of the same things. Like, work is stressful, we have deadlines to meet, and sometimes that means you don't eat because you're finishing a deadline. And it's just how it goes. We lived it through college, and it was a preview of how it was going to be for work. So I it kind of like validated that idea that we do need more self-care. And I think, especially as Latinos, like, self-care doesn't seem to be a thing that you talk about because it's like, ay, no seas flojo, like, you just
Just
got to
get
keep
over it.
going. Yeah, and it's like, I say that because also, like, our parents, they don't have a day off kind of thing, like the types of like jobs that they've maybe had to do, they didn't give them a day off. And our jobs are in corporate, we're in front of a computer, it doesn't seem the same like amount of work that they've had to maybe do manually. So it was always that clash of like, what am I doing? Like, why am I thinking this way? I should just, be grateful for what I have and just keep going. Like, But then again, like I felt that urge of we do need more self-care because it's going to help us essentially be happier, whether it's at work or at home with our kids, whatever it is. Like self-care is important. And I think as engineers and people in STEM, we like challenges. We like learning. I think that's the part that we all share. We love learning. That's what we went through physics and calculus and all these hard classes. And that's where I thought of also the personal development part because, like I said, I love courses, and that's what I discovered. I am a lifelong learner. I love learning new things. And so that's what I want to have part into the box of like that digital community where you can have like trainings each month, kind of like bring on a speaker and they'll talk about, whether it's entrepreneurship or whether it's finance, things that you might not maybe have on your list of learning, but that will be practical and helpful for you. So that's part of that digital component. And of course, having the community of asking questions. I know when I started out, I was kind of like, okay, what do I do? And not just in the technical aspect of it, but just the culture of the company, things like that. Like I recently spoke to a girl that's starting out, like she's like entry level engineer, and she was like, I don't know if I'm asking too many questions. Sometimes I'm done early and I don't know if I should tell them because then they're gonna think like she's finishing too quickly. She do it right? And it reminded me of when I started, and I was like, this is exactly what I want to do. I want to help these other women that they don't know how to deal with these things of like, should I say something, should I not, should I ask questions, am I asking too many questions, should I ask for help or should I not? Like there's so many things that we go back and forth, especially when we get started. And of course we're always doubting ourselves, and it's like, school didn't really prepare me for this. I learned from books but I don't have the practical part of it. So that's where I was like, okay, this is what I want to help with. I want to be able to kind of be like that big sister of, hey, here, I can help you. Like, it's okay. You'll get through it. And also the part of maybe like we talked about motherhood, like maybe a lot of these women are just getting married and they haven't had, they're not, they don't have kids yet. But having that part of, okay, like she did and she has two kids, she's still working, like how do we balance it all? So that's part of that whole community that I want to have. And the box is kind of like an added bonus of having practical items that I don't want it to just be a box of stuff that you
Mhm.
just kind of like put in the closet and that's it. Because I'm an environmental engineer as
Mhm.
well. I do not want waste. So the point is to have items that you can actually use, so things kind of like a journal that, for work I always use like a notebook, and that's where I write everything and I check things off, like make lists. So that's kind of what the kind of products that the box is going to have, kind of pens, but bringing that personality that sometimes I speak from experience. Working in construction, you would never see me with a pink pen because I was like, oh, they're gonna think I'm like crazy. And of course I started out in construction, so I had all those doubts and all of that, and now I'm like, no, you can take a pink pen, you can take pink boots, it's fine if you want to, so it's kind of like that part of bringing that sparkle into like engineering and STEM. So kind of like making sure that you're still yourself and bringing your whole self to your job, like your personality. And that's where the products come in. So whether it's a pink pen or a notepad or a water bottle or any product like that, that you're still going to have, practical in your life, you're going to use it, but it brings that kind of like sparkle to it. And that's why I chose that name, because like the sparkle, it reminds you to like be yourself, sparkle, and then STEM, of course, and then connect, because I want all of us to be able to connect through that community. So
Y-
yeah.
Yeah, and I was going to say, as you were kind of explaining all of that, I think the best part of it is, yes, you're giving this subscription to a box, but it's I feel like it's more like you're subscribing to a bigger thing than just the box. The box is kind of an added bonus. You're subscribing to the community, to the information behind the community. people helping you, having other people that are maybe going through similar things as you are, they're helping you and guiding you through that process. I think that's kind of the main thing, really. And the box is kind of an added bonus.
Yeah,
We
it's
did
an
mention
eye-catching thing.
we're gonna give away one of these boxes, and I think it's amazing that you're doing this. Obviously, there's a lot of women in STEM out there struggling, trying to find that community that you're providing. So I'm excited to partner with you. It's been a lot of fun just connecting here in the podcast as well. Uh, what do people need to do to get this box, and just give us a little sneak peek into what's going to be in the, I think, December box we talk about?
Yeah, yeah. So right now, it's going to be mainly like adding your email to the sign up list, to the email
Mhm.
list. But once we do launch officially, then you can go to like the website sparklestemconnect.com, and there's going to be three options for like a 12-month option, prepay option, 6 months, and then month to month.
Mhm.
So it's kind of like all three options give you the same thing. It's just kind of like if you want to sign up for a longer term, but all three options are going to give you the box and access to the community. And the community aspect of it is going to be hosted like on a Facebook group for now, because that's just honestly the easiest part that I thought of for now. Kind of to see how much it grows, and I have been part of like other memberships, so I have ideas on kind of like which platforms that I might be able to use. But I figured let's just start. I've learned throughout this whole journey that you just have to jump sometimes, and I'm a perfectionist, so it's been hard to kind of accept that. But especially with this box, like there's still moments that I'm like, I'm crazy. What am I doing? Like no one's gonna like this. And then an hour after, I'm like, oh, someone liked it. Yes. So it's definitely like a roller coaster of emotions. But I think the main concept of it, of like trying to help other women, is what kind of like keeps me going, because that's what I wanted to have when I was kind of like starting out in engineering. So
Yeah, that's great. So we'll leave a link in the description of this video and podcast and everything, to sign up to be entered into a raffle. I think we're gonna open it as soon as this episode comes live, and I think we're gonna leave it open maybe for a month, and then we'll give it away in December. Perfect for the holiday season. If you have someone that you want to give it to, make sure you enter. The easiest way to do it is just, again, the link in the description below. And the more people you invite to connect in on that same link, you're gonna get more interest into the raffle. So obviously invite more people, and we hope you enjoy the box at the end of the day. What are some recommendations you have for kind of women in STEM? I know you have connected with a lot of people, and met a lot of people probably through social media. What has been kind of the best part of sharing your journey, as sometimes good as sometimes bad, but what has been that experience in terms of like connecting and create that community that you are obviously developing with this box?
yeah, I think the main thing that I have found through, especially connecting, like let's say through Instagram, which I think is amazing that we can do that nowadays. I think it's been that we are all willing to help each other.
Mhm.
And I think that's a big part of our STEM community that I think is really nice, that we're not trying to just kind of like, oh, it was hard on me, so let me just step away and let it be hard on you too. It's kind of been that thing of like, it was hard on me, but I don't want it to have to be hard on you as well. So definitely that part of helping each other and being that kind of like that example of like, hey, I stumbled, you don't have to stumble. So that has been a big impact that has had like on me, because I think I've always been kind of like, no one wants to help me, kind of like I have to figure it out on my own. And seeing how like other women in STEM like have been kind of open to sharing about, let's say, this box without me like asking them to, without me telling them, oh, can you please do this? Like, no, they've been like, oh, let me just, talk about it. Like, this
Mhm.
is amazing. So I think that part of that, like, definitely helping is the main thing. And like you were asking for advice for like other women in STEM kind of thing. I think one of the main things would be to kind of remember who you are and that it's okay to be yourself, as cliche as that sounds, because I have definitely kind of like accepted that. I think, especially at work, I always had this like other persona of kind of like, I have to be this way so that they take me seriously. But I think as you kind of grow in your career, and obviously with experience as well, you start being more comfortable with how you act and how you do your job. And of course, as long as you do your job well, as long as you're trying, then it kind of comes off as okay, like you do have that experience. And I think it's always been that part of like you're having to prove your worth, but as long as like you're confident in that value that you're bringing, then other people will see that, and it'll be an easier way to kind of get where you want to go in your career.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's completely true. And again, I think the more we share our stories, the more we share kind of what we're learning and just sharing the journey that we're through. I think the good things, the bad things, sometimes things are not pretty. Sometimes you see the success, but behind the scenes, there's a lot going on, and there's a lot of suffering, and there's a lot of things that maybe are not as easy as they appear. So it's always great to continue just sharing those stories and yeah, just kind of continue providing the information out there and providing advice to other people that ask for it, provide just being open. I think that's kind of one of the things that I try to do as well. Just if people ask questions, I'm always happy to answer them, jump in a call, whatever it takes to just help other people. I think that's kind of the main goal here on the podcast and everything. Um, do you have any last piece of advice for other women in STEM, other engineers, other mothers, recent mothers that are trying to get their careers
Yeah.
and be a mother at the same time?
Yeah, that's definitely a tough one. I still struggle with that one. I think it's important to give yourself some grace. I think as women, we try to do too many things at once because I know we can, but sometimes it's taxing. It's very overwhelming. So I think definitely be clear on your expectations. And I recently learned that you kind of have to define for yourself what kind of mom you want to be,
Mhm.
and let's say what kind of engineer you want to be, and kind of have those expectations lowered, because I think we always try to put it like really high, and that's when we're like racing against ourselves. So definitely kind of have a clear path of who you want to be and what kind of, what kind of mom you want to be, and that kind of gives you an idea of like, okay, if you want to do this, then go for it. Even if maybe you take a break from work, it's okay. I've taken 5 months off.
Yeah,
But I think also remember that, no, time is like the most valuable asset that we have, and we don't get to live it twice, especially with our kids. So I've really tried to like hone in on that, because I know that they grow up so fast that I'm like, personally, like my career can wait, but my kids cannot. So
right. Great. That sounds. I don't know how to top it off. It's great, great advice. I'm glad you're sharing your story as well. I think that's kind of the main takeaway of this is just being able to be candid and sharing these stories. I think it's important as well because sometimes we keep those things to ourselves, thinking I'm the only one really going through this. I don't want to share this because it's maybe you think it's dumb, maybe you think it's scary, maybe you think it's worthless, but other people out there are waiting to hear those stories, are waiting to connect with you, are waiting to really understand what you're going through because they connect on the same level as you do. So I think is really great that you're sharing these stories as well, and please continue doing that. I'm happy to support as much as I can. I just have one last question for you, and that's how can we continue engineering our future?
I think by continuing to expand our knowledge in anything that we do, not just engineering, but our whole life as a whole, because engineering is everything that we do. So
Yeah, yeah.
learning is definitely a way.
I do love this question because it's kind of open ended and all the answers are great, and I'm always fascinated with every single answer that I receive from this question, and I'm happy to hear again all the things that you're doing. It's fantastic to continue working as a mother, as an engineer, as a business owner, doing all these things. I'm sure the logistics of connecting all these people and getting all these boxes out to everyone, it's tremendous. So I really applaud you for all of that. Where can people connect with you, reach out to you if they have any questions? Again, we will link the giveaway for the box, and as well as your website, so they can purchase if they want to. But where can people connect with you on social media, or anywhere else?
Yeah, so for the box, it's going to be on Instagram. It's just Sparkle STEM Connect. And then for the podcast, it's Póngase las Pilas Podcast.
Yeah, we'll make sure to link all of that. Again, thank you so much, Laura, for coming to the show, and it was a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's great. I love this episode.
If you really enjoyed this episode of the Dream Future Podcast, you're going to love the content we have over our website at luisfelipeduque.com. You can find the link in the description of this episode, as well as the show notes at luisfelipeduque.com/podcast. Every episode comes packed with a lot of links, a lot of information. So you can find all the show notes and all the information related to this episode over at luisfelipeduque.com/podcast. Thank you so much for coming back to this episode. Thank you, Jack Winters, for the music. And as always, let's continue engineering our future.